My name is Hayden, 68 years old, retired engineer with 40 years of hard work behind me. I thought I had raised my only son, Michael, right. We were always close, just the two of us against the world after his mother passed. My retirement savings of $240,000 was supposed to give me comfort in my final years. Instead, I discovered Michael had taken it all to buy a Mercedes for his father-in-law. When he handed me $50 as my share, something inside me broke. If you want to know what a father does when betrayed by his only child, stick around. Before I continue, let me know where you are watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe if you want more real-life lessons that cut deep. Life has a funny way of teaching you lessons when you least expect them. My journey as a single father began 38 years ago when my wife Sarah died from complications after Michael was born. We had been high school sweethearts, married young with big dreams. Her passing left me with a newborn son, and a grief so profound I sometimes wondered how I would make it through each day. But Michael became my reason to keep going. Every morning, I would look at his innocent face and promise Sarah I would give him the best life possible. I worked as a mechanical engineer at a manufacturing plant, putting in 60-hour weeks and taking every overtime opportunity that came my way. We lived in a modest 3-bedroom house in a decent neighborhood in Pennsylvania. Nothing fancy, but it was safe, clean, and ours. I still remember those early years, carrying Michael in a baby carrier to daycare before dawn, picking him up after dark, both of us exhausted but together. As he grew older, I never missed a parent-teacher conference, a baseball game, or a school concert. My coworkers would often ask how I managed it all, and the truth was simple. I barely slept. 4 hours a night was my normal for years, but seeing Michael thrive made every sacrificed hour worth it. Our life was built on small economies. I packed lunches instead of buying food, drove the same car for 15 years, and learned to be handy around the house to avoid repair bills. Every dollar saved went either to Michael or into my retirement fund. I started that fund the day Michael turned 5, faithfully contributing every month without fail. It was my promise to myself that one day, when I could no longer work, I would have security. Michael was a bright, sensitive boy. He excelled in school without much pushing from me, seemed to inherently understand the value of education. We had our rough patches during his teenage years, of course. What father and son don't? But even then, there was always respect between us, always communication. I made sure he knew that, no matter what happened, we were a team. When he graduated from college with a business degree, I could not have been prouder. He was the first in our family to earn a university education. He looked so handsome in his cap and gown, tall and confident with my chin and his mother's gentle eyes. I remember thinking Sarah would have burst with pride seeing him that day. Michael landed a job at Wilson Financial, a prestigious firm downtown. His starting salary was more than I was making after 30 years at the plant. He insisted on taking me out to dinner to celebrate, paying the bill with his first paycheck. That night, watching him confidently order wine and calculate the tip, I felt I had succeeded as a father. My boy had become a good man. Then came Jessica. Michael met her at a company function 3 years ago. She was beautiful, well-educated, and came from money, old money. Their courtship was brief, and before I knew it, they were engaged. The wedding was extravagant, held at her parents' estate with over 300 guests, most of whom I had never met. I felt out of place in my rented tuxedo, seated at the family table, but somehow still feeling like an outsider. That was when I first met Harold, Jessica's father. He made his fortune in real estate development and never let anyone forget it. Tall, with silver hair, and the confidence of a man who has never questioned his place in the world. During his wedding speech, he spoke more about his own achievements than the young couple. I noticed how Michael watched him with something like reverence, laughing too hard at his jokes, nodding eagerly at his pronouncements. After the wedding, I began to see subtle changes in my son. His calls became less frequent. When we did speak, the conversation often turned to material things. The vacation home Jessica's parents had in Aspen, the country club membership they had gifted the newlyweds, the connections Harold was introducing him to. I tried not to worry, told myself it was natural for a young man to be impressed by such things. Michael had grown up watching me count pennies at the grocery store, after all. But there was something in the way he now looked at my modest home, my sensible sedan, my simple lifestyle, that felt like embarrassment rather than the affectionate understanding we had always shared. By this time, I had retired from the plant. 40 years of hard work had earned me a decent pension, and my personal savings had grown to $240,000. Not a fortune by any means, but enough to give me comfort in my remaining years. I had plans to renovate my kitchen, which still had the original cabinets from when we bought the house. I dreamed of traveling to the Grand Canyon, Yellowstone, and other natural wonders I had only seen in photographs. Simple dreams, perhaps, but they were mine. My daily life had settled into a pleasant routine. Mornings spent in my small vegetable garden, afternoons volunteering at the local veterans center, or meeting friends for coffee. I had joined a book club at the library, and even started learning to play chess. My needs were few, my pleasures simple. I had earned this peace, this modest contentment, through decades of sacrifice and hard work. Little did I know that the security I had so carefully built was about to be shattered by the person I loved most in the world. The first sign that something was off came about 6 months after the wedding. Michael called on a Tuesday evening, which was unusual in itself. Our regular calls had settled into a Sunday afternoon routine. He asked casual questions about my day, my health, before suddenly shifting the conversation. "Dad, I was thinking about your retirement fund," he said, his voice carrying an odd note of forced casualness. "Is it still with First National?" "Yes, same as always," I replied, surprised by the question. "Why do you ask?" "Just wondering if you might be looking for better returns," he said. "With my connections at work, I could help you find something that beats those savings account interest rates." I thanked him, but explained I was comfortable with my conservative approach. At my age, security mattered more than high returns. Michael didn't push, but I remember feeling vaguely unsettled after we hung up. A week later, I received an unexpected invitation to dinner at Harold and Eleanor's mansion in the upscale part of town. In the 18 months since the wedding, I had been there only twice, both times for formal events with dozens of guests. This invitation was for a small family gathering, according to Jessica's text message. The house was as imposing as I remembered. A sprawling colonial with perfectly manicured grounds and a circular driveway where luxury cars were parked like showroom displays. Harold greeted me with a firm handshake and a glass of scotch I didn't ask for, but felt obligated to accept. "Michael tells me you worked in manufacturing," he said, as he led me through rooms larger than my entire first floor. "Good, honest work. My father started as a bricklayer, before he built his first apartment complex." The way he said it made clear that, while my career was respectable, it was something to be transcended rather than celebrated. Throughout dinner, Harold dominated the conversation, talking about his latest acquisition, a commercial property downtown that he had snagged for a mere $7 million. "The Mercedes dealership wants to renew their lease," Harold announced, swirling his wine. "I told them they need to showcase the new S-Class models more prominently if they want to keep that prime location. Beautiful machines, those S-Class, German engineering at its finest." I noticed how Michael leaned forward eagerly whenever Harold spoke about business or possessions. When Harold mentioned he was considering upgrading his current Mercedes to the latest model, Michael jumped in with surprising knowledge about engine specifications and luxury features. "You should test drive one, Harold," Michael suggested with unusual enthusiasm. "I could arrange it through a client at work." After dinner, as we moved to the patio for coffee, Eleanor mentioned an upcoming trip to Europe they were planning. "You should come with us, Hayden," she offered, though her tone suggested she knew I would decline. "Michael and Jessica are joining us," Harold added. 3 weeks, 5 countries. A man should see the world while he still has his health, don't you think? I nodded politely, but said nothing about how such a trip was far beyond my means. Throughout the evening, I caught Jessica and Michael exchanging glances whenever Harold made such pronouncements, as though they shared a secret understanding. Over the next few weeks, Michael began visiting more frequently, but never alone. Jessica always accompanied him, her designer purse and carefully casual outfits making my living room look shabbier than I had ever noticed before. During one such visit, while I was in the kitchen making coffee, I overheard Jessica asking Michael if he had talked to him about it yet. When I returned with the coffee mugs, they quickly changed the subject. But later, as they were preparing to leave, Jessica broached the topic of my savings again. "Your dad has worked so hard all these years," she said, her voice sweet, but her eyes calculating. "He deserves to see his money grow, instead of just sitting in a bank account earning nothing." Michael nodded enthusiastically. "Dad, seriously, you could be earning 3 times the interest with some simple adjustments. No risk, just smarter allocation." I changed the subject, uncomfortable with their persistence. After they left, I found myself checking my online banking for the first time in weeks. Everything looked normal, my savings intact. I told myself I was being paranoid, that Michael was simply trying to help in his own way. Then came the call that changed everything. It was a Thursday afternoon, and I was just returning from my chess club meeting at the senior center. The caller identified herself as Meredith Cooper from First National Bank's Fraud Prevention Department. "Mr. Walsh, we noticed an unusual withdrawal from your savings account yesterday and wanted to verify you authorized it," she said, her professional tone carrying an edge of concern. "Withdrawal? I haven't made any withdrawals recently," I replied, a chill running through me. "Our records show a transfer of $50,000 to an external account yesterday at 3:15 p.m., she continued. "This wasn't authorized by you?" I assured her it wasn't, my heart pounding as she placed me on hold to speak with her supervisor. When she returned, she explained they would freeze the account immediately and launch an investigation. "We'll need you to come to the branch in person with identification," she explained. "The signature on the withdrawal form doesn't match our records, but it appears someone may have attempted to forge your signature." As soon as I hung up, I called Michael. The call went straight to voicemail. I texted him, asking him to call me urgently. No response. I tried Jessica's phone with the same result. A knot of dread formed in my stomach as I grabbed my car keys and drove to Michael's apartment across town. When I arrived, their assigned parking space was empty. I rang their doorbell repeatedly, but no one answered. As I turned to leave, their neighbor, a young woman walking her dog, recognized me from a previous visit. "Looking for Michael and Jessica?" she asked. "I think they went out of town for a few days. Saw them loading up the car yesterday afternoon." I thanked her and returned to my car, my mind racing. Something was very wrong, but I couldn't bring myself to voice my darkest suspicion that my own son might have something to do with the missing money. There had to be another explanation. Perhaps it was a banking error, or maybe Michael was planning a surprise for me. But as I sat in my car, staring at my silent phone, a sense of foreboding washed over me. The unusual questions about my finances, the sudden interest from Jessica's family, Michael's unreturned calls. They were all pieces of a puzzle I didn't want to solve. The next morning, I arrived at First National Bank as soon as they opened. The branch manager, a woman named Patricia with kind eyes and a serious demeanor, took me to her office immediately. What she revealed sent my world spinning. "Mr. Walsh, I'm very sorry to inform you that there have been several large withdrawals from your account over the past week," she said, sliding a printout across her desk. "The total amount is $235,000. I stared at the paper, unable to process what I was seeing. Nearly my entire life savings, gone. "This can't be right," I whispered, my mouth dry. "I didn't authorize any of this." Patricia's expression was sympathetic, but firm. "The withdrawals were made in person, Mr. Walsh. Someone presented your ID and a power of attorney document, giving them access to your accounts. Power of attorney? I never signed any such thing. She nodded, pulling out another document. We have the form on file. It appears to be notarized, but if you're saying you didn't sign this, I looked at the signature. It resembled mine, but anyone who knew me well could have forged it. Someone like my son. We've already flagged this as potential fraud, Patricia continued. But I have to ask, is there any family member who might have access to your identification? Sometimes, in these situations, she didn't need to finish. We both knew what she was suggesting. I felt physically ill. My son, I said, the words barely audible. Michael Walsh. Patricia nodded, making a note. Does he know your social security number, date of birth, mother's maiden name? Of course he did. Michael knew everything about me. I had trusted him completely. We'll need to file a police report, Patricia explained gently. This is clearly fraud, regardless of who committed it. I nodded numbly, unable to reconcile the Michael I had raised with someone who could steal his father's life savings. There had to be an explanation. Maybe he was in trouble, being threatened, or had made a terrible investment mistake he was too ashamed to admit. After completing the necessary paperwork at the bank, I drove to Michael and Jessica's apartment again. Their car was still absent, the apartment dark. I sat in my car for nearly an hour, calling Michael's phone every few minutes, each unanswered ring deepening my despair. Finally, I decided to try Jessica's parents' house. I had only been there for those formal occasions and felt awkward arriving unannounced, but I was desperate for answers. As I drove toward their upscale neighborhood, I called my old friend Bob Stevens, who had retired from his law practice the same year I left the plant. Hayden, what's going on? You sound terrible, Bob said after I briefly explained the situation. I don't know what to think, Bob. I can't believe Michael would do this. But the evidence. Don't confront anyone yet, Bob advised. If this is what it looks like, you need to be careful. Where are you now? I told him I was heading to Harold and Eleanor's house to look for Michael. I'm coming to meet you, Bob insisted. Text me the address. Don't go in alone. I agreed and hung up, grateful for his support. As I turned onto the tree-lined street where Jessica's parents lived, I noticed several cars parked along the curb. One caught my eye immediately, a brand-new Mercedes sedan, gleaming silver in the afternoon sunday. The temporary license plate was visible as I drove past. Instead of pulling into Harold's driveway, I continued past and parked around the corner. Something told me to approach cautiously. I walked back, staying on the opposite side of the street. As I neared the house, I saw Michael, Jessica, and Harold standing in the driveway, gathered around the new Mercedes. My heart pounded as I watched from behind a large oak tree. Harold was gesturing enthusiastically, walking around the vehicle, running his hand along its sleek surface. Jessica was smiling, taking photos with her phone, and Michael, my son, was beaming with pride, holding what appeared to be car keys in his hand. I moved closer, staying out of sight. Now I could hear their voices carried on the breeze. Dad, what do you think? Everything you wanted, right? Jessica was saying to Harold. Harold laughed. A booming sound of pure satisfaction. The S500, top of the line. I've had my eye on this model for months. $200,000 of pure German engineering, Michael announced proudly. Nothing but the best for you, Harold. $200,000. The amount struck me like a physical blow, almost the exact sum missing from my account. Harold clapped Michael on the shoulder. You did good, son. Real good. I told you Michael would take care of it, Daddy, Jessica said, her voice sickeningly sweet. He knows how to make things happen. Better than that financial advisor you were using, Michael added. He wanted you to wait another 6 months. Harold laughed again, taking the keys from Michael's hand. Why wait when you have a son-in-law who understands how to move money efficiently? Son-in-law. The way Harold said it, with such pride and approval, made me feel physically ill. For years, I had worked to gain my son's respect, to be worthy of his love. Now he was giving away my life savings to buy another man's approval. The The final blow came when Harold pulled Michael into a bear hug, the kind I had given Michael countless times throughout his life. "This is why I always say you're the son I never had," Harold declared loudly. "A man who understands what really matters." I must have made a sound, a gasp or cry I couldn't suppress, because suddenly all three heads turned in my direction. For a long, terrible moment, we simply stared at each other across the driveway. Michael's face drained of color. Jessica's mouth formed a perfect O of surprise. Harold merely looked annoyed at the interruption. In that moment, looking at my son standing beside the luxury car he had purchased with my stolen savings, everything became devastatingly clear. I had lost much more than money. I had lost the son I thought I knew. Time seemed to stop as we stared at each other across the manicured lawn. Then Michael took a hesitant step forward, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. "Dad," he said, his voice unnaturally high. "What are you doing here?" I walked slowly toward them, my legs feeling unsteady beneath me. "I think that should be obvious, Michael. I'm looking for my $240,000. Jessica immediately moved closer to her father, as though seeking protection. Harold merely raised an eyebrow, his expression more curious than concerned. "You should have called first, Hayden," Michael said, attempting a casual tone that didn't match his panicked eyes. "We could have arranged a proper meeting." "Like you arranged with the bank?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady despite the rage and hurt churning inside me. "Creating fake power of attorney documents? Forging my signature?" Harold stepped forward now, placing a proprietary hand on the hood of the new Mercedes. "I think there's been a misunderstanding here. Michael has made some excellent investment decisions lately." "Investment decisions?" I repeated, the words bitter in my mouth. "Is that what you call stealing your father's retirement savings to buy your father-in-law a luxury car?" "Dad, please," Michael said, glancing nervously between me and Harold. "You don't understand. This is business." "Business?" I felt my control slipping. "Explain to me what kind of business involves emptying my bank account without my knowledge or permission." Jessica interjected, her voice cold. "Michael was helping you diversify your portfolio. That money was just sitting there doing nothing." "It was doing exactly what I wanted it to do," I countered, "providing me security for my remaining years. Years I spent working so your husband could have every advantage in life." Harold chuckled, the sound grating on my already frayed nerves. Hayden. This is why the working class stays working class. No vision. That money is now part of a sophisticated investment strategy. The Mercedes is merely the first step." "First step to what?" I demanded. Michael jumped in, clearly rehearsed. "Dad, Harold has connections in luxury car importing. This Mercedes is a demonstration model. We're setting up a high-end car import business. The returns will be enormous." I stared at my son, unable to believe what I was hearing. "And you didn't think to ask me before using my life savings for this scheme?" "I tried to talk to you about investments," Michael said defensively. "You weren't interested. There's a vast difference between discussing investment options and stealing my money." Harold sighed dramatically. "Nobody stole anything. Michael is your son. Family money stays in the family. He's simply reallocating resources for maximum return." The casual way he dismissed my life's work, my sacrifices, my autonomy, ignited something in me. "That was not your decision to make. Either of you," I said, looking between Harold and Michael. Michael reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. For a moment, I thought perhaps he was going to offer to return my money. Instead, he extracted a $50 bill and held it out to me. "Here," he said, as though bestowing a great gift. "This is your first dividend. The business is already generating returns." I stared at the money, unable to comprehend the insult being offered. $50 for $235,000 stolen. "Are you serious?" I finally managed. "See? Ungrateful," Harold muttered to Jessica. "This is exactly why Michael needed to take control of the situation." "Take control?" I echoed, looking at my son with disbelief. Michael, do you hear yourself? Do you hear him? You stole from me. You betrayed me. And for what? To impress this man? Michael's face hardened, an expression I had never seen before. You don't understand modern business, Dad. You worked in a factory your whole life. Harold has shown me how real money is made. Real money? I repeated. The money I earned building things with my hands paid for your food, your clothes, your education. It was real enough then. And now it's doing something meaningful, Jessica interjected. Instead of just sitting in a low-interest account. Meaningful to whom? I demanded. Not to me. I had plans for that money. Plans for my retirement that I earned through 40 years of hard work. Harold laughed outright. Renovating your outdated kitchen? Taking bus tours with other retirees? Michael told us about your so-called plans. Hardly the best use of capital. The casual cruelty of his dismissal stunned me. These were my dreams, modest though they might be. Who was he to decide they weren't worthy? Dad, Michael said, his tone patronizing. You need to trust me on this. In 6 months, you'll thank me when the returns start really coming in. I looked at my son, truly looked at him, and saw a stranger. The boy I had raised, the young man I had been so proud of, was gone. In his place stood someone willing to steal from his own father to gain approval from his wealthy father-in-law. The bank knows, Michael, I said quietly. They've identified it as fraud. The police will be involved soon. Michael's face paled. You went to the police? Against your own son? I went to the bank, I clarified. They recognized the signatures were forged. They're the ones who contacted me about suspicious activity. You can clear this up, Michael said quickly. Tell them you authorized the transfers. It was just a misunderstanding. I shook my head slowly. No, Michael. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was theft and forgery and betrayal of the worst kind. Harold stepped forward, his expression darkening. Now listen here, Hayden. You're being selfish and short-sighted. Michael is building something for the future, for his family. By stealing from his family, I replied evenly. Sometimes the older generation needs to step aside and let the younger, more dynamic minds take control. Harold continued as if I hadn't spoken. Your outdated thinking is holding Michael back. I turned to my son. Is that what you believe? That I'm holding you back? After everything I've sacrificed to give you opportunities I never had? Michael wouldn't meet my eyes. You don't understand how the world works now, Dad. Things are different. Harold has shown me how to think bigger. Bigger doesn't mean better, Michael. And it certainly doesn't justify stealing from your own father. Jessica cut in, her voice sharp. Nobody stole anything. Michael has power of attorney. A fraudulent power of attorney, I corrected. I never signed those documents. The three of them exchanged glances, and I knew in that moment that they were all complicit. This wasn't just Michael trying to impress his in-laws. This was a calculated plan they had developed together. You have 24 hours, I said, my voice surprisingly calm given the storm inside me. Return my money, all of it, or I will press charges for fraud and theft, even against my own son. Michael looked stricken. Dad, you wouldn't. I never thought you would steal from me either, Michael. Yet here we are. Harold stepped forward, his imposing height meant to intimidate. Don't threaten my family, Hayden. You're embarrassing yourself and your son with these accusations. I looked at the man who had so thoroughly corrupted my child and felt nothing but disgust. Your family? Michael is my family, or at least he was. Until you taught him that loyalty and honesty matter less than material things. This conversation is over, Harold declared, turning away dismissively. Michael, take your father home. He's clearly upset and not thinking rationally. I'm thinking more clearly than I have in months, I replied. 24 hours, Michael. Then I go back to the police with everything I know. As I turned to leave, I heard Harold mutter to Jessica, This is why I told Michael to set up that offshore account. Old people get confused and cause problems. I paused, those words confirming everything. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a well-intentioned mistake. This was deliberate, calculated theft. From a father who would have given his son anything, had he only asked. The $50 bill still lay on the ground where I had let it fall from Michael's outstretched hand. I left it there, a pitiful symbol of how little my lifetime of sacrifice was now worth to my only child. The drive home passed in a blur. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, but I barely felt the tension. My mind replayed the scene in Harold's driveway. Each word, each dismissive gesture, each betrayal cutting deeper with every recollection. When I finally pulled into my driveway, I sat motionless for several minutes, unable to summon the energy to go inside. My house, once my sanctuary, now seemed to mock me with its modest appearance, its need for repairs I could no longer afford. The kitchen renovation I had planned, the trips I had dreamed of taking, all gone because my son decided my dreams weren't important enough. Eventually, I made my way inside, moving on autopilot. I sank into my recliner, the one Sarah and I had bought when we first moved in. It had been reupholstered twice in its lifetime, a testament to my belief in maintaining what you have rather than constantly replacing it, a value I thought I had passed on to Michael. The memories came unbidden. Michael at 5, sitting on my lap in this very chair, as I read him bedtime stories after a long day at the plant. Michael at 10, proudly showing me his science fair project we had worked on together every evening for a week. Michael at 18, opening his college acceptance letter, tears in his eyes, as he hugged me. "We did it, Dad," he had said that day. "Everything you worked for. It was worth it." Was it? I wondered now. Had any of it been worth it if this was the man my son had become? I must have dozed off in the chair because I woke to the sound of my phone ringing. For a brief, hopeful moment, I thought it might be Michael calling to apologize, to explain it had all been a terrible mistake. Instead, it was Bob Stevens, my old friend and former attorney. "Hayden, where are you? I've been trying to reach you for hours." I glanced at the clock, surprised to see it was past 7 in the evening. "I'm home, Bob. Sorry, I should have called." "What happened?" "I went to the address you sent, but no one was there." I told him everything, my voice flat as I recounted the confrontation, the luxury car, the $50 dividend, and Harold's dismissive attitude toward my life's work. "Those bastards," Bob growled when I finished. "Hayden, this is criminal activity, plain and simple. Forgery, fraud, theft. Michael could go to prison for this." Prison. The word sent a chill through me. Despite everything, the thought of my son behind bars was almost unbearable. "I gave him 24 hours to return the money," I said. "And if he doesn't?" "I don't know, Bob. He's my son." Bob's voice softened. "I know, Hayden, but what he did, this isn't a misunderstanding or a mistake. This was calculated. He created fraudulent documents, forged your signature, and took your life savings to buy his father-in-law a luxury car. That's not the action of a son who respects his father." His words, though harsh, reflected my own thoughts. This wasn't impulsive or desperate. Michael had planned this betrayal methodically. "I can help you," Bob continued. "I still have my license, and I know people in the DA's office. If you want to pursue this legally, I'll be with you every step of the way." "Let me think about it," I said. "I want to give him the chance to make it right." After we hung up, I sat in the gathering darkness of my living room, lost in thought. The rational part of me knew Bob was right. Michael had committed serious crimes, regardless of our relationship. But the father in me still hoped for an explanation, an apology, some sign that the son I raised still existed somewhere inside the man who had stolen from me. My phone rang again. This time it was Patricia from the bank. "Mr. Walsh, I wanted to update you on our investigation," she said. "We've confirmed the power of attorney document was notarized by someone who doesn't exist. The notary number is fake." "I see," I replied, unsurprised, but still disappointed. "We've also discovered something else," she continued, her voice concerned. "There was an attempt to transfer the remaining $5,000 from your account this afternoon, but our freeze prevented it. So they had tried to take everything. Not content with stealing $235,000, they had returned for the pittance I had left. "Thank you for letting me know," I said. "Mr. Walsh, have you filed a police report yet? This is clearly fraud, and the sooner you report it, the better chance of recovering your funds." I promised to do so the next day and hung up. Then I sat in the darkness, weighing my options. If Michael returned the money as I had demanded, could I forgive him? Could our relationship ever recover from this betrayal? And if he didn't return it, could I really follow through on my threat to press charges against my only child? As midnight approached, my phone remained silent. No call from Michael, no text, no apology, just silence. In that silence, a realization crystallized. The son I had raised was gone. Perhaps he had never truly existed except in my hopeful imagination. The real Michael was the man standing proudly beside a stolen Mercedes, more concerned with impressing his father-in-law than honoring his own father. By morning, I had made my decision. It wasn't just about the money, though that loss was devastating. It was about teaching Michael that actions have consequences, that relationships require trust, and that some betrayals cut too deep to be easily forgiven. I thought about all the lessons I had tried to teach him growing up. Honesty, integrity, responsibility. Somewhere along the way, those lessons had been discarded in favor of Harold's philosophy. Take what you want. Use others as stepping stones. Value things over people. As the first light of dawn filtered through my curtains, I picked up my phone and called Bob. "I've made my decision," I told him. "I want to press charges. Not just for me, but for Michael too. He needs to understand what he's done." "I'll be there in an hour," Bob replied without hesitation. "We'll go to the police together." When I hung up, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and resolve. I had spent my life protecting Michael, sometimes from his own mistakes. Perhaps my greatest failure as a father was not allowing him to face consequences earlier. That would change today. The money mattered. Of course it did. But more important was the principle. No one, not even my son, had the right to decide what should happen with my life savings. My dreams might seem small to Harold and Jessica, but they were mine, earned through decades of honest work. As I prepared to meet Bob, I glanced at the family photos that lined my hallway. Michael through the years, growing from a gap-toothed boy to a confident young man. In every image, his smile reached his eyes, his love for me apparent. I wondered when that had changed, when the values I thought we shared had been replaced by something colder and more calculating. I took down the most recent photo, Michael in his business suit at his office Christmas party last year. The man in that image was already a stranger to me, I realize now. His smile practiced, his eyes assessing, already looking past me towards something he considered more valuable. I placed the photo face down in a drawer. Whether Michael returned the money or not, our relationship was forever altered. Trust, once broken, is not easily repaired. Love remains, of course. I would always love my son. But love without respect, without honesty, is a hollow thing. With that realization came a strange sense of peace. I had done my best as a father. Michael's choices were his own. Now he would learn what I had tried to teach him all along, that integrity matters more than possessions, that how you treat others defines your character, and that some things, once lost, can never be fully regained. Bob arrived at 8:30, dressed in a suit that spoke of his years as a respected attorney. Though retired, he carried himself with the same authority that had made him formidable in the courtroom. His presence gave me strength as we sat at my kitchen table, mapping out our course of action. "First things first," Bob said, spreading out a notepad. "We need to document everything. When did you first notice money missing? What exactly did Michael say at Harold's house? Were there any witnesses to their conversation about the offshore account?" Methodically, we constructed a timeline of events, from Michael's initial questions about my savings to the confrontation in Harold's driveway. Bob took detailed notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions. The bank already has records of the fraudulent power of attorney, I explained. Patricia, the branch manager, confirmed the notary was fake. Bob nodded grimly. Good. That's clear evidence of premeditation and fraud. What about the car purchase? Do you know which dealership they used? I didn't, but I remembered the temporary plates on the Mercedes. Bob made a note to check with the DMV. We should go back to the bank first, he suggested. Get copies of all documentation, withdrawal slips, the forged power of attorney, everything. Then we'll go directly to the police to file a report. As we prepared to leave, my phone rang. Michael's name appeared on the screen. I showed it to Bob, who nodded encouragingly. Put it on speaker, he whispered. I answered, my heart racing despite my resolve. Hello, Michael. Dad. His voice sounded strained. We need to talk about yesterday. I'm listening, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. You were upset, and I understand why. I should have explained the investment opportunity better before moving forward. Not an apology, I noted. Not an admission of wrongdoing. Just regret that he hadn't explained better. It wasn't your decision to make, Michael. That was my life savings. I know, Dad. But sometimes opportunities come along that require quick action. Harold has connections with luxury car importers in Germany. The profit margins are incredible. In 6 months, your investment could double. My investment? I echoed. Michael, I didn't invest in anything. You stole my money. There was a pause. Then Michael's voice hardened slightly. That's a harsh characterization. I was acting in your best interest. You're not getting any younger, Dad. Your money needs to work harder for you. Bob shook his head in disgust, writing something on his notepad. No remorse. Michael, I want my money returned. All of it. Today. Another pause. That's not possible right now. The funds are allocated to the business venture. The Mercedes is just the first step. The Mercedes that's registered in Harold's name? Well, yes, he's the face of the operation, his connections. Stop, I interrupted. Just stop. You took my money without permission to buy your father-in-law a luxury car. There is no business venture, is there? This was about impressing Harold, nothing more. Michael's voice took on a pleading tone. Dad, please. If you go to the police, it will ruin everything. My career, my marriage, everything I've worked for. You should have thought of that before you forged my signature and emptied my accounts. What do you want? Michael asked, his voice now desperate. I can't return the money right now, but I can set up a payment plan. $5,000 a month until it's paid back. I looked at Bob, who was doing calculations on his notepad. At $5,000 a month, it would take nearly 4 years to repay what was taken. 4 years during which I would have to trust the son who had already betrayed me. Not good enough, I said firmly. The Mercedes goes back to the dealership today. The money goes back into my account. All of it. Harold won't agree to that, Michael said quickly, then seemed to realize his mistake. So it is Harold's car? Not a business asset? Michael backpedaled. That's not what I meant. It's complicated. No, Michael. It's very simple. Either the money is returned in full today, or I go to the police with evidence of fraud, forgery, and theft. You would do that to your own son? His voice cracked. After everything we've meant to each other? The emotional manipulation was so transparent it almost made me laugh. I'm not doing anything to you, Michael. These are the consequences of your own actions. I need more time, he pleaded. You've had time, I replied. 24 hours, as I said yesterday. Return the money or face the consequences. I ended the call before he could respond, my hand shaking slightly as I placed the phone on the table. You did well, Bob said, squeezing my shoulder. He admitted enough to hang himself several times over. Now let's go build our case. At the bank, Patricia had prepared a complete file of documents related to the fraudulent withdrawals. The forged power of attorney was particularly damning. the signature a clear attempt to mimic mine but missing subtle details. Our fraud department has also identified the account where most of the funds were transferred, Patricia explained. It's a business account under the name Premium Auto Imports LLC, opened 3 weeks ago with Michael listed as the primary signatory and Harold as a secondary. Bob made copies of everything, while I provided a detailed statement for the bank's investigation. By noon, we had a substantial file of evidence documenting the fraud. Our next stop was the police station, where we met with Detective Garcia, a serious woman with compassionate eyes who specialized in financial crimes. She listened attentively as I explained the situation, asking occasional questions but mostly letting me tell the story in my own words. "I understand how difficult this must be, Mr. Walsh," she said when I finished. "Filing charges against family is never easy." "No," I agreed, "but necessary." She nodded, then turned professional. "Based on what you've told me and the documentation you've provided, we have clear evidence of several serious crimes: forgery, fraud, identity theft, and grand larceny. The amounts involved make these felony charges." The word felony hung in the air. Bob had warned me, of course, but hearing it from a police detective made it more real. "What happens now?" I asked. "We'll open an investigation immediately," Detective Garcia explained. "The bank records provide sufficient evidence for us to move quickly. We'll need to interview Michael, Harold, and anyone else involved. We'll also track the money trail and document the purchase of the Mercedes." "How long will all this take?" "Financial crimes can be complex, but given the clear paper trail and the amount involved, we'll prioritize this case. I'd estimate we could have enough to present to the district attorney within 2 weeks. 2 weeks until my son might face arrest and criminal charges. The reality of what I was setting in motion hit me fully. "Is there any way to resolve this without criminal charges if the money is returned?" I asked. Detective Garcia exchanged glances with Bob before answering carefully. "That would ultimately be up to the DA's office, but in cases of financial crimes involving family members, they sometimes consider deferred prosecution if full restitution is made and the victim doesn't wish to pursue charges." "I want my money back," I clarified, "but I don't necessarily want my son to go to prison." "I understand," she replied. "Let's focus on building the case first. That gives your son time to make the right decision." As we left the police station, Bob suggested one more step. We should hire a private investigator to document the Mercedes in Harold's possession. Visual evidence of the fruit of the crime will strengthen the case. By that afternoon, Bob had engaged Thomas Reeves, a former police officer turned private investigator. His instructions were simple: photograph Harold with the Mercedes, document the vehicle's location, and if possible, obtain copies of the purchase documents from the dealership. "I have contacts at most of the high-end dealerships," Thomas assured us. "If that car was purchased locally, I can get the paperwork." Over the next 3 days, Thomas proved his worth. He provided clear photographs of Harold driving the Mercedes, parking it at his country club, and showing it off to friends. More importantly, he obtained copies of the purchase agreement from Silver Star Mercedes. "Paid in full, $200,000 even," Thomas reported, showing us the documents. "Purchaser listed as Premium Auto Imports LLC, but the vehicle is registered solely in Harold Jenkins' name. There's no business connection whatsoever." The final piece of evidence came from an unexpected source. Jessica's younger sister, Amanda, with whom Michael had always been on good terms, reached out to me directly. "Mr. Walsh, I heard what happened," she said when I answered her call. "I want you to know I had nothing to do with this. What they did to you was wrong." "Thank you, Amanda," I replied, genuinely touched by her concern. "There's something else," she continued, her voice lowering. "I overheard Jessica and Michael arguing last night. She was telling him to stick to the story about some business venture. Michael said something about how they never intended for you to find out until the money was gone offshore. Would you be willing to make a statement to that effect?" I asked, trying to keep the excitement from my voice. "Yes," she said firmly. "My father and sister have gone too far this time. using your retirement money to buy Dad a status symbol. It's disgusting. With Amanda's statement added to our growing file of evidence, Detective Garcia informed us they were ready to move forward with the case. Arrests could come as early as the following week. That evening, as I sat on my porch watching the sunset, I felt strangely calm. I had done what needed to be done. The truth would come out, and justice would be served. Whether Michael understood the lesson or not was beyond my control. I had raised him as best I could, taught him right from wrong. His choices were his own. My phone rang just as dusk was settling. Michael's number. I answered, expecting more excuses or manipulations. Instead, his voice was subdued, almost unrecognizable. Dad, the police came to my office today. They asked questions about your money, about the Mercedes, about premium auto imports. I told you there would be consequences, Michael. This is really happening, isn't it? He asked, sounding for the first time like he truly understood the gravity of his actions. Yes, it island. The detective mentioned something about deferred prosecution if the money is returned in full. There was a long silence. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, I'll figure something out. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't an admission. But it was, perhaps, the first step toward understanding. The county courthouse was imposing, all marble columns and polished wood, designed to remind everyone inside of the serious nature of legal proceedings. I sat in the front row of the courtroom, Bob beside me, as Michael entered with his attorney, a sharp-faced woman in an expensive suit. Harold and Jessica followed, taking seats directly behind Michael. Harold's expression was thunderous, Jessica's carefully blank. 3 weeks had passed since my visit to the police station. 3 weeks of statements, evidence gathering, and legal maneuvering. The district attorney had filed charges of grand larceny, forgery, identity theft, and fraud against Michael. Harold was named as an accessory after the fact. The preliminary hearing was brief, but consequential. Michael's attorney immediately requested a conference with the judge and the district attorney. The three disappeared into the judge's chambers, while we waited in tense silence. 30 minutes later, they emerged. The district attorney looked satisfied. Michael's attorney professional but subdued. The judge called the court to order. In the matter of State versus Michael Walsh, the defendant has agreed to a plea arrangement, the judge announced. The terms are as follows. Full restitution of $235,000 to be paid immediately to Hayden Walsh, surrender of the Mercedes S-Class vehicle purchased with the stolen funds, 2 years probation, and 200 hours of community service. I glanced at Michael, who stood with his head bowed, shoulders slumped in defeat. Furthermore, the judge continued, the defendant will undergo financial counseling and ethics training as directed by his probation officer. Upon successful completion of all terms, the felony charges will be reduced to misdemeanors. It was a fair outcome, one that Bob had helped negotiate. Michael would avoid prison, but not consequences. The money would be returned, which was my primary concern. As the hearing concluded, Harold stormed out without looking at anyone. Jessica hesitated, glancing between her father's retreating back and her husband's defeated posture, before hurrying after Harold. Their abandonment of Michael in his moment of disgrace spoke volumes. In the hallway outside the courtroom, Michael approached me cautiously, his attorney hovering nearby. The money will be transferred back to your account today, he said, his voice flat. The Mercedes is being returned to the dealership this afternoon. I nodded, unsure what to say. Part of me had hoped for a genuine apology, some recognition of the pain he had caused beyond the legal consequences. Harold and Jessica are divorcing me, he added unexpectedly. Once I agreed to the plea deal, Harold called me a disappointment, and Jessica said she couldn't be married to a criminal. The irony wasn't lost on me. The very people who had encouraged his crime had abandoned him when it came time to face consequences. Where will you go? I asked, surprising myself with the question. Michael shrugged. I don't know. The firm put me on unpaid leave pending an internal investigation. I'll probably lose my job. My apartment was mostly paid for by Harold's connections, so that's gone too. He looked lost, more like the little boy I remembered than the confident young man who had handed me $50 as my dividend. Michael, I said carefully, what you did was wrong, deeply wrong. You betrayed my trust in the worst possible way. I know, he whispered, looking at the floor. It will take a very long time for me to trust you again, if I ever can. He nodded, accepting this hard truth. But, I continued, you're still my son. If you're serious about making amends, about learning from this, I'll help you find a place to stay until you get back on your feet. Michael's head jerked up, his eyes wide with surprise. After everything I did, why would you help me? Because that's what fathers do, I replied simply. We help our children learn from their mistakes, not just punish them for making them. 2 months later, I stood in my newly renovated kitchen, admiring the cabinets Michael had helped install. With my retirement savings restored, I had proceeded with my original plans. Michael had insisted on doing the labor himself, working evenings and weekends around his new job as an assistant manager at a local hardware store. It wasn't the prestigious financial position he once held, but it was honest work. The owner, a friend of Bob's, had agreed to give Michael a chance despite his legal troubles. Michael approached the job with a humility I had never seen in him before. He had moved into a small studio apartment nearby, furnished with second-hand items, rather than the luxury pieces Jessica had insisted upon. Gone were the designer suits and expensive watch, replaced by work clothes and a simple timepiece that had belonged to my father. Our relationship was still fragile, the trust rebuilding slowly. We had agreed to weekly dinners, during which we talked more honestly than we had in years. Through these conversations, I came to understand how Harold's influence had corrupted Michael's values, how the pursuit of status and approval had blinded him to the wrongness of his actions. He made me feel special, Michael admitted during one such dinner, like I was part of some exclusive club of people who understood how the world really worked. Looking back, I can see he was just using me to get what he wanted. And what about what you wanted? I asked. Was impressing Harold worth risking your integrity, your career, your relationship with me? Michael shook his head, genuine regret in his eyes. Nothing was worth that. I was so focused on gaining Harold's approval that I threw away the relationship with the one person who had always supported me unconditionally. Those words meant more to me than any legal restitution. They showed that perhaps the son I had raised was still there after all, beneath the influence and poor choices. The Grand Canyon was even more magnificent than I had imagined. Standing at the south rim, watching the early morning light paint the vast chasm in shades of red and gold, I felt a profound sense of peace. Worth the wait? Bob asked, standing beside me with his camera. Absolutely, I replied. This trip, the first of several I had planned with my restored savings, represented more than just a checked item on my bucket list. It was a reclaiming of my dreams, my autonomy, my right to decide how to spend the money I had earned. Harold and Jessica had disappeared from our lives completely after the court case. Through mutual acquaintances, I heard that Harold's business reputation had suffered when details of the case became public. Jessica had reportedly moved to Florida with a new boyfriend, someone with even more money than her father. Michael was not with us on this trip. That level of reconciliation was still in the future, if it ever came. But he had helped me plan the itinerary, researching the best viewpoints and hiking trails suitable for someone my age. It was a small gesture, but a meaningful one. As I stood at the edge of that magnificent canyon, I reflected on the lessons of the past year. I had learned that sometimes love means allowing those we care about to face the consequences of their actions. I had learned that my modest dreams were no less valuable than anyone else's grand ambitions. And I had learned that integrity, once lost, can be rebuilt, but only through consistent actions over time. Michael was on that journey now, rebuilding his integrity day by day, honest decision by honest decision. Whether our relationship would ever fully recover remained to be seen. But I had done what I believed was right, both as a father and as a man who deserved respect. The $50 dividend Michael had offered me that day in Harold's driveway now sat framed on my wall, a reminder of how easily values can be corrupted and how vigilantly they must be protected. Beside it hung a simple, handwritten note Michael had given me the day my kitchen renovation was completed. Thank you for teaching me what really matters. Life offers no guarantees. Relationships can be broken, trust can be betrayed, dreams can be delayed. But in standing up for ourselves, in refusing to accept disrespect even from those we love, we honor our own worth. And in offering a path to redemption, however difficult, we honor the capacity for growth that exists in everyone. So if you're facing betrayal from someone close to you, remember, demanding accountability isn't cruel. It's often the most loving thing you can do. And sometimes, the greatest act of parental love isn't protection from consequences, but ensuring they occur in a way that allows for learning and growth. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision involving someone you love? What did you do, and how did it turn out? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that standing up for yourself is not just okay, it's necessary. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, integrity is not built in grand gestures, but in the small choices we make every single day.